Okay. Hi, my name is Anthony Delalo, and today I'll be giving you guys my persuasive speech on why minors should not be charged as adults. Imagine back to when you were about 12 years old and you're a high, energized, rambunctious, competitive little self, and you love to wrestle. So you're wrestling around with a girl who your mom's babysitting, and you're 12, she's 6, and after you guys are wrestling for a while unsupervised, you get her in a headlock to win the wrestling match. Uh, Accidentally, you choke her out too long, and now she is not breathing. You come up, or you wait a couple minutes, and then you go upstairs to tell your mom what had happened, but you're trying to think of something to say so that it doesn't get you in too much trouble. So you wait a couple minutes. Finally, you go up and tell your mom. Fast forward 2 years. Now you're finally getting your case closed in front of a judge and jury. You are sentenced to life in prison, becoming the youngest American citizen ever sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This is the case of Lionel Tate, who was 14 by the time he got sentenced, but 12 at the time of the act. I'll go more into that story later, and this is a picture of him when he's 14. So there's a movement that's taken over a country to change the juvenile justice system and erase any distinction between young offenders and adult criminals. Almost all states have changed their juvenile justice laws, allowing more youths to be tried as adults and scrapping long-time efforts to help rehabilitate delinquent kids and prevent future crimes. So how can some minors be labeled as adults? It's simply defined in the United States that a minor is someone who is under the age of 18, 17 and younger. Whether it be 17 years, 11 months, and 31 days. So, how does this make this different? Was he considered an adult before he carried out the act of violence? No. How then did a violent act cause them to cross over that line that is defined by age? The current debate over juvenile crime is being dominated by two voices. Elected officials proposing quick fix solutions and media more intent on reporting violent crimes and successful prevention efforts, which may sound kind of obvious now, but if you really pay attention, you'll notice how bad the media covers these things, which I will talk about as well a little later. So minors should not be tried as adults in our society today. We need to stick to what we decided on as a country to have these two separate justice systems so that juveniles can be tried as juveniles and adults can be tried as adults. This will be apparent through the statistics, thought processes that I talk about, and some of the examples throughout my presentation. So first, there are two separate justice systems for a reason, juvenile and adult. First off, I would like to start off with the Justice Law Center definition of a juvenile to kind of give you what the law considers a juvenile. Juvenile, the age at which an individual is subject to the jurisdiction of adult criminal court instead of juvenile court. In most states, the age of criminal responsibility is 17 or 18. Those states also have provisions to transfer younger youth to the adult system. So just think about that for a second. The age at which an individual is subject to the jurisdiction of adult criminal court instead of juvenile court. So age is what comes down to the two separate courts, to be exact, theoretically. So currently, an estimated 250,000 delinquents are tried, sentenced, or incarcerated as adults every year across the United States, according to the Justice Law Center of Delinquency. And that means 10,000 youths are detained or incarcerated in adult jails and prisons, which is very impactful in a negative way towards minors, and I'll go over some of the ways that how that affects them that dramatically. So emotionally and like physically, the brain itself is not fully developed until the age of 25, but we're considered an adult in the United States at 18, so it's mostly developed by 18, but you still, as a minor, you don't have the maturity level yet. You don't have the decision-making levels that are considered to be adult, You don't have the consequences leveled out in your head as reasoning of why you would do something. So here are some of the development stages of your brain. From birth to 2, you get your senses, motor abilities to understand the world. 2 to 7, you have your pre-operation, which is when the child uses mental representations of objects and is able to use symbolic thought and language. From age 7 to 11, you get the concrete operations, which is the child uses logical operations or principles when solving problems. And then from ages 12 and up is when you get mostly what I'm talking about, the formal operations of the use of logical operations in a systematic fashion with the ability to use abstractions. And that's where decision making comes in and the real realization of what consequences mean of your actions. So also along with the emotional and physically wrong, you're 36 times more likely to commit suicide and are at greater risk of sexual victimization being a juvenile in a adult prison. So in an adult prison, you don't get the opportunities that are offered in a juvenile court of rehabilitation, which is the main goal. This is juvenile, this is adult, so you get the goals of in the juveniles rehabilitation, education, learn from your mistakes, get a second chance, whereas the adult system is punishment. What you did, you get a punishment for. There isn't much rehabilitation at all to it. It's kind of, you get your time, you do the time, and then you're done. You get no discipline or lesson of how to correct what you did, pretty much. So being a juvenile and an adult, you have no chance of receiving further education, and without treatment and education, the only thing juveniles can learn while incarcerated with adult criminals is how to become a better criminal, being that they can get brainwashed easily, they're susceptible to manipulation, and they're surrounded by people that have already made bad decisions. Young offenders who are treated as adults become a bigger threat to society because they're deprived of efforts of rehabilitating them. Like I said, they have a higher chance of, if going in the adult court, they have a higher chance of coming out and doing a crime again and going back in than they do going through the rehabilitation programs that the juvenile court offers. Judge Martha Grace, who's the Chief Justice of Massachusetts Juvenile Court, once was quoted saying, "The juvenile court was established in an attempt to say kids are not just small objects, but people of 10 years with a future ahead of them. I am disturbed by the tendency now to lock kids up and throw away the key." That's very impactful because basically it's saying how kids used to be able to go through the juvenile system and have a chance, where now once they get charged as an adult, you just throw away the key. They can't get any help or fix. They're basically a lost cause now. So that's the emotional and physically wrong parts of why juveniles should not be charged as adults. Cost effectively though, huge difference. According to CBS News, the average cost of incarcerating a juvenile for 1 year is between $38,000 and $65,000. So I have the average at about $49.5 thousand in the United States. Whereas the average cost of intervention program, which the juvenile program offers, is $4,300, which is insane amount of tax dollars being saved, and for a good reason, and with better results. So history is known to repeat itself. Saying is no lie, especially when you look at this topic. Until Chicago established the first juvenile court in the United States in 1899, children 14 and older were considered to be as responsible as adults for their actions. Minors as young as 13 were occasionally sentenced to death, and some were executed. So discomfort with people finally realizing that that's completely wrong, that children receiving the same punishment that adults were, led to the creation of the two separate courts, one for adults, one for juveniles. The court for the court for children offered solutions such as therapy, education, community service, prevention programs, rehabilitation, as well as incarceration and restitution of victims. So if we already felt that children should not be able to be tried as adults, and we created a juvenile system to correct this, why turn our backs again and go back more than 100 years in time and go back to having one system? Just doesn't make sense. The answer simply is that we shouldn't. We need to better our juvenile system, a system that has been working since 1899. So most juvenile arrests have nothing to do with violence at all, actually. There we go. Or little to do with violence. As you can see here, we got from 1995 to 2008. This is juvenile violent crime in general. We have murder, which is down 62% since 1995. Forcible rape, which is down 40% since 1995. Robbery, which is down 38% since 1995. And then aggravated assault, which is down 33%. Those in general is, violent crime total, which all violent crime in general is down 36%, and violent crime only makes up 5% of juvenile crimes. Most only go through juvenile system once, which is statistically incredible because that means that they learned their lesson and that they haven't came back yet. The media, however, thrives on sensationism, that they make it appear that the crime is everywhere in order to sell more newspapers or have people broadcast or tune in to broadcast, and that there's some kind of true juvenile predator, which is a very rare breed, it turns out, that most juveniles learn from their mistakes, so there's not a juvenile predator of kids always having crimes, which the media tends to make it seem like. Ray Simmering, law professor at the University of California at Berkeley, also found that juvenile crime rates had not increased over time, and he did a very in-depth study that came out with the same results. So the public rarely hears the good news in the juvenile court system, and that alone tells us that they deserve a second chance. So back to Lionel Tate. He had no intent of killing her, obviously. Regardless of what happened, a 14-year-old does not deserve to be locked up the rest of his life. Simple as that. I mean, he's 14 years old, 12 at the time he did it. What does it say about our society when we look at our youth? To me, it says that we don't care about the futures and would rather just get them out of sight and get them out of mind. We cannot give up on our youth. So what can we do? We can help by using our voice. Voices, especially in 2016, is a huge way to get out what people want. Protest, write to Congress, speak up, bring it up to people. You can fight the court if you're actually in the situation to argue that you should not be tried as an adult. I'm not going to say that it's always going to work, sadly, but definitely worth a try. And there's prevention groups, AA, rehab, violence groups, domestic violence groups. I mean, you name it, there's help everywhere surrounding us. Even at OU, there's groups that can help with AA and other groups that will help you stay out of trouble and learn from your mistakes. So imagine how better our country would be if we gave the juveniles a second chance. Like I said previously, juveniles that go through the juvenile court are less likely to commit a crime again. So if they're tried as adult and are incarcerated in an adult prison, what good does that do for us besides cost more money and have them not learn anything? So in conclusion, the topic of juvenile justice and sentencing minors with adult penalties is a heated debate. Many elected officials go for the quick fix solutions. The media will always show the worst of juvenile crime, not any positive, which makes people feel that there's a huge problem. Minors should not be tried as adults in our society. Simple as that. Bad quick fixes such as moving a juvenile up to an adult court because they do not know how to handle the case or whether they think it'd be easier for the adult court to handle them, just is simply not the answer. Juvenile crime does exist, and youth do commit violent acts. It's the truth. However, it is not on a scale that many people that would like the public to believe. The statistics don't lie. Juvenile crime is falling. The solution to this problem is not a simple one and cannot be solved by simply putting kids in adult prisons. More effective solutions should be explored and put to use. We need to have faith in our juvenile system, like I said before. There's a growing willingness to turn a cold shoulder to life's losers, even if those losers seem to be 17 younger, whether they're 6, 12 in Lionel's case, or even 17. Rehabilitation seems to be out and retribution is in. The law created a defining law between minors and adults, but now everyone wants to ignore the definition because the crime got uglier. The minor is still a minor, no matter how ugly the act. Thank you very much. That concludes